This is the continuation of chapter 2. It cut off because I don't have a lot of memory on my phone. Jenner didn't wait around to see the results of his terrible invention. Even he admits that small p was almost unknown when he started his work of destruction. Today, vacation has so intensified in the development of small p that all vacation Mexicans have either had it or are in danger of getting it. Mexico has had the good sense to abolish the barbarous practice of capital punishment and the cruel and useless practice of vivisection, which puts that country a step ahead of the United States in that respect. It is to be hoped that those people who fought so hard for freedom and democracy will also be able to throw off the heavy yoke of medical oppression. Evidence from Italy. Dr. Charles Ruta, professor of Materia Medica at Perugia University, Italy, presents some interesting figures comparing the small p deaths of the vacation soldiers with the women and boys outside the armed services. Vacation is stressed in that country, which accounts for the high small p rate among all ages, but more thoroughly enforced in the Army. The boys are inducted at the age of 20 years. The figures show the death rate from small p is about twice as high among men over 20 soldiers as among women of the same age. And then here's a chart. Small p death rate of thoroughly vacationed Italian soldiers compared with the less vacationed women and boys. Okay. I don't know if you want to screenshot that. It's hard to read. But it's deaths, 1887, 1888, 1889, and totals. The entire population under 20 years and 20 to 30 years military age. So I'm just going to leave it there so you can look at it for a minute, or if you want to screenshot it, because I don't want to try to explain it. Dr. Ruta traced the records for many years following this published record, and the results continued with the same high death rate among the completely vacation soldiers and with a lower death rate among the rest of the population. Although England was the first country to adopt compulsory vacation laws, her people soon found it was a disastrous practice and fought to have the law abolished. About the time of the First World War, the English people had succeeded enough in resisting the law to notice a considerable decrease in small p, aided of course by the sanitation program. Germany and Italy were still trying to enforce vacation on the entire population. The following chart shows a comparison of the small p deaths of the three countries. And this is a chart showing increase of small p under compulsory vaccination. And it says England and Wales on the left, Germany in the middle, and Italy on the right. I'm going to leave it there for you to look at or screenshot. High small p rate in vacationed Egypt. The League of Nations monthly health report for October 15th, 1929 gives a report on Egypt with an effort toward justifying the reoccurring small p epidemics in spite of the compulsory vacation laws. However, the whitewash doesn't cover the inefficacy of this useless practice. The report states, quote, in Egypt, vacation is compulsory under the decree of 1890. Penalties are provided for infringements. It has not been found possible as yet to enforce vacation everywhere, and small p continues to claim a fair number of victims every year. The last great epidemic broke out in 1919 and extended into 1920. More than 5.5 million persons were vacationed during those 2 years, and this completely arrested the spread of the epidemic. In 1921, the number of cases had gone down to 92, as compared with 7,895 in 1919 and 3,004 in 1920, end quote. The epidemic wore itself out in 2 years, and the vacationers claimed that it was the serum that arrested it. If vacation could arrest an epidemic at all, it should certainly do it in less than 2 years. If there had been no vacation at all, there would have been a much lower small p rate, as it proved by world records where the facts are not falsified. The fact that there was less small p the following year was no proof that vacation curbed it. Isn't it quite logical that all those who were in a condition to develop it did so during the long 2-year epidemic, so there would not be many to contract it in the following year? The following report put out by the League of Nations Health, in parentheses a question mark, department is a typical example of how the medical schemers influence the average unthinking person with data that appears to be true and convincing. Quote, Northern Africa. As vacation progresses, the most remarkable success is being achieved in Egypt, which in 1926 had 2,677 cases with 544 deaths. But in 1930, it, small p, caused only 14 cases without deaths. This is undoubtedly due to the vacation campaign begun at the end of 1925 and completed in 1926. Approximately 14,600,000 vacations were performed, thus reaching practically the whole population, end quote. Here we have a number of statements that are hard to reconcile with known facts. For instance, 1. In June 1925, the population of Egypt was estimated to be 13,964,900, yet the report said they gave 14,660,000 vacations. Since there are more vacations reported than people, either the figures are fabricated or the vacationers didn't really believe in vacation and knew it would not protect for even 1 year, so they re-vacationed thousands of people with a vain hope that the repetition of failure would in some way reap success. Number 2. In the first report, they blamed the frequent outbreaks of small p on the claim that it was impossible to enforce vacation on all the people. Yet their figures in the second record showed the number of vacations exceeded the population. Number 3. The first report stated that their widespread vacation campaign in 1920, which reached 5,500,000 people, had completely arrested small p, and the following report of 1931 made it clear that the complete and thorough vacation campaign succeeded in conquering small p, even to the point where there were no deaths at all from that cause. This type of propaganda has a tendency to lull the people into a sense of false security, which leaves the real cause of disease unchecked. Let's follow the record a little farther and see what happened. The 5.5 million vacations in 1920 were supposed to have brought small p under control, yet in 1926, only 6 years later, the second report tells of a sweeping small p epidemic in which 2,677 were stricken and 544 died. In spite of the 5,500,000 vacations in 1920 and the 14,600,000 vacations in 1926, and all the vacations in the intervening years, including the compulsory vacations of all infants, there occurred another larger and more terrible small p epidemic in 1932, only 6 years after the alleged complete control of small p in Egypt. This sweeping epidemic continued for 2 years, aggravated, of course, by the meddling vacationers. By the end of 1934, 7,650 cases had been reported, of which 1,373 had died. Where is the remarkable success of vacation boasted of by the medical faction of the League of Nations? Quote, these figures speak for themselves and eloquently proclaim the utter futility of vacation as a preventive or mitigant of small p. And that's from Swan, The Vacation Problem, page 291. League of Nations Health Committee in the dark. In their monthly epidemiological report, RE 132, dated November 15, 1929, this one-time great organization revealed its biased confusion on health matters by stating, it will therefore be plain that, if the conclusions are to be accepted and allowing for individual peculiarities, re-vacation should be repeated 3 or 4 years at least, or even more often. Joseph Swan comments on this in his book, The Vacation Problem, page 288, by saying, all these demands for frequent re-vacation may be to an absurdity by asking a simple question. How is it that in England, abandonment of even primary vacation by approximately half the parents during the past 25 years, and the almost entire neglect of re-vacation at any age, have been accomplished by the lowest small p mortality rate on record? After smallpox vaccination was found to be so financially profitable, doctors and serum manufacturers, serums for other diseases were invented and enforced with the same financial increase, but also with the same decrease in the elimination of the disease. Diphtheria is one of the most notable examples of this. The following table is one of the many records that show how the unvacationed diseases declined more rapidly than those that were supposed to be wiped out or controlled by vacations. This report was compiled before serums were invented for the other diseases shown. Chart showing decline of disease without vacation. England and Wales. Death rate per million children living. Ages between birth and 15 years. So there's a chart. 20-year periods on the left of measles, scarlet fever, whooping cough, and diphtheria. So So you can see that if you want to screenshot it. Looks like they all went way down between 1941 and 1948. Here we see that measles decreased 94.1% during this period. Scarlet fever decreased 99.7%. Whooping cough decreased 91%, while diphtheria, the disease that was supposed to be conquered by serum immunization, decreased only 88.8%, which was the least of all. If left alone, it would have declined at the same rate as the others, or even faster because it was the least prevalent. It will be noted that in 1861, diphtheria was the least fatal of the children's diseases, but according to this report of the Ministry of Health, the 1948 record shows it to have increased to the second most deadly of the children killers with its 105 deaths per million, while whooping cough was only slightly higher with 121 deaths. Another report issued by the British Ministry of Health gives the diphtheria death rate from among 4 million children who were not immunized. It gives a 5-year period, 1945 to 1949, in which the diphtheria death rate declined from 551 cases in 1945 down to 63 in 1949. What caused this phenomenal drop of 87% in only 5 years when the record of immunized children showed a decline of only 88% in an 87-year period of immunization? The credit cannot be claimed by the serum makers because these children were not quote-unquote protected, with a question mark in parentheses, by any vacations. The Ministry of Health attributed the rapid decline of the other diseases to improvements in sanitation, nutrition, housing, education, and social conditions. But diphtheria and small p were claimed to have declined because of quote-unquote prophylactics. If vacation and immunization were preventives of small p and diphtheria, they should at least keep pace with the decline of other diseases. Immunization increased diphtheria in some countries. Although France had rejected immunization after seeing the disasters that followed its use, she was pressured into submitting to it after German occupation. By 1941, most of the French children had been inoculated, after which the diphtheria incidence rose to 13,795 by the end of that year. By 1943, diphtheria had increased to 46,750. At the beginning of the Second World War, immunization was made compulsory in Germany, and the diphtheria rate soared up to 150,000 cases in 1939, while in on vacation Norway there were only 50 cases. Space in this chapter does not permit the reviewing of the numerous records that condemn immunization. More on this subject will be given in the chapter on diphtheria and immunization in Book 2. Decline of vacation in the United States. The overall picture for United States has been toward a steady decline in small p since the gradual abandonment of vacation laws in the various states. Only a few of the more backward states and some of the medically dominated institutions and businesses still impose compulsory vacation laws on the people. In 1902, when vacation was endorsed by the majority, the death rate from small p was 2,121. By 1910, vacation disasters had caused it to lose favor to such an extent that the small p death rate dropped down to 202. The serum makers used the frenzy of the First World War to work up a nationwide vacation campaign that raised the small p death rate up to 358 in 1919, and by 1921 it had increased to 642. When the people began to notice that the vacation were the ones who suffered the worst from small p and flu, an after effect of vacation, they lost faith in it to a large extent, and by 1927 the deaths dropped down to 138, where it has been fluctuating ever since. In contrast to our diminished small p rate under optioned vacation, we have an excellent example of compulsory vacation in our U.S.-dominated Philippine Islands. In a 10-year period, 1911 to 1920, 24,436,889 vacations were given, which resulted in 75,339 deaths. Before vacation was introduced, the highest death rate in the Philippines, even during epidemics, was only 10% of the population. After many years of thorough vacation and revacation, the death rate rose to 74%, which is the highest in history. In the United States, 1919, when vacation was indifferently accepted, the death rate from small p was only 358, while in the Philippines, 1919, under strict vacation enforcement, the death rate from this cause was 18,213. In 1920, in vacationed Italy, the small p death rate was 12,155 as compared to only 508 in the United States during the same period. In spite of these cold facts and thousands of others like them, the promoters of vacations insist that vacation has been a blessing to the world and has reduced disease. This all goes to prove the old saying that figures can't lie, but liars can figure. And there is a little poem here. It's called Inoculate the Doctors. Inoculate for smallpox, inoculate for mumps, inoculate for typhoid, for colds and nervous slumps. Inoculate with cowpus and germs of every brand. Inoculate with monkey glands to make us young again. But one fine day the laity will move in self-defense to inoculate the doctors with a little common sense. And that is by a medical student in Winnipeg, Canada. That's the end of chapter 2.